Julian Assange has become one of the most influential and divisive figures of our time.
Reporters that don't have new information, to some degree, have nothing useful to say.
A martyr for free speech and freedom of information to some, a reckless anarchist to others.
Full and frank investigations.
I suppose very flawed personalities often are, sort of the engineers of history. And I think Julian Assange is one.
WikiLeaks! I love WikiLeaks!
Assange's most disruptive act of all was his intervention in US politics in the 2016 US election.
What clearly happened there is that WikiLeaks was a useful tool. Somebody figured out how to use that. Julian might have been a useful idiot to President Trump or his advisors or whoever, helping him to get more political momentum.
For anyone to suggest that Julian is owned by any particular government is simply wrong, and you need to know Julian to know that that's simply not the case.
In the 2016 campaign, WikiLeaks sent shockwaves through the US political system. The publication of thousands of emails stolen from senior figures in the Democratic National Committee was enthusiastically embraced by candidate Donald Trump. Now, as president, Trump has flipped. His administration is coming after Assange, but is it just about national security, or is it also part of a broader attack on media freedom?
It most likely changed the course of American politics and the American presidency. And here again, this is a delicious irony. The president that he helped to elect now wants to prosecute him.
Tonight on Four Corners, the United States versus Julian Assange. In June 2012, Julian Assange was a man under pressure, wanted for questioning in Sweden over allegations of sexual assault, and the subject of an ongoing investigation in the United States over the publication of huge tranches of classified information. On a spring day, he made his way here to the Ecuadorian Embassy in London seeking asylum.
Julian sought asylum in 2012 in the Ecuadorian Embassy because he didn't have assurances that once in custody to face extradition to Sweden, he wouldn't be served with a US extradition request. We had asked the Australian government to seek those assurances. The Australian government had refused to do so. It was only then that he sought asylum, which was his right as a matter of international law.
Julian arrived around 1 p.m. It's publicly known that he was disguised as a delivery man. He had his request for asylum written and ready. He handed it over to us.
Fidel Narvaez was consul at the embassy when Ecuador took him in.
We were challenging the major superpower in the world and some of its closest allies. A small nation took that bet. It was going to be a very, very tough fight.
First to breaking news tonight, the diplomatic high drama surrounding Julian Assange's asylum bid.
The New York Times is reporting the government of Ecuador is prepared to allow WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to remain in its embassy in London indefinitely.
Approving the asylum request was a bold and provocative decision.
The embassy was surrounded by no less than 50 to 60 British armed police. The main street was closed. They were outside every window of the embassy, the inside of the building, everywhere.
Inside this embassy after dark, I could hear teams of police swarming up into the building through its internal fire escape. But I knew there would be witnesses, and that is because of you. The world was watching, and the world was watching because
The embassy would be Assange's home for nearly 7 years.
Julian slept in a floor in an inflatable mattress for more than 4 months, at least. We needed to adapt some working spaces for him to be able to work as well. We needed to adapt all our routines in order to allow him to have the many, many visitors from all over the world that wanted to come and see him. And Julian himself is a workaholic. He was always working, doing something, either working with his computer, either having meetings with his team, with his visitors, with his legal team, giving conferences, giving interviews.
From inside the embassy, Assange continued to challenge governments around the world. Over the next 3 years, WikiLeaks published more than 2 million foreign government emails, the details of international trade agreements, and evidence of how America's National Security Agency was tapping the phones of foreign leaders.
I think there was always a lot of anger at Julian Assange for accepting and publicizing United States national security information. I think there was never a sense inside the Justice Department that Julian Assange was a journalist or that he was just, trying to publish national security information for any whistleblowing purpose, but that he just kind of wanted to take whatever he could get and publish it without any wonder whether any care whether it would do damage to the United States national security interests or not.
In the work that we do, the work that WikiLeaks does.
Assange continued to broadcast to the world through an interview program aired on the Russian government TV channel Russia Today.
You have fought against a hegemony of the United States.
A production company is created who produces this program. It's offered for sale. The only TV station that had actually wanted to negotiate that deal was RT. Had no editorial control over the material, simply bought the package. So that is the essence of the cooperation between Julian and RT.
When the criticism is made about RT, you don't believe it is essentially an arm of the Putin administration?
Well, I mean, who cares? I mean, you are working on a certain platform. You don't want anybody to question your integrity. My God, this was a program being created and sold on the market without any editorial control. So who does it care? Who cares? I mean, where it was, published, and what to read into that?
What's Julian Assange, this crusader against oppressive government, getting in bed with the Russian government? That didn't last terribly long, but it was sort of a red flag. And people, I think even people who had been sticking up for WikiLeaks and Assange all along began to get, chills about, who is this guy really? And we didn't know, we did, he did seem to have a blind spot when it came to Russia.
The fact that Julian Assange has been working hand in glove with Russia Today, RT, seems to indicate to me that he has less journalistic enterprises behind him and more goals of undermining democracy and achieving the aims of the Russian government.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am officially running for President of the United States, and we are going to make our country great again.
By the middle of 2015, the US was heading into what would be a bitterly contested presidential election campaign.
I will be the youngest woman president in the history of the United States.
Julian Assange had been highly critical of Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State.
Oh, thank you all. Well, I had a lot of history with him because I was Secretary of State when WikiLeaks published a lot of very sensitive information from our State Department and our Defense Department. And, you know, I think that whatever claim to transparency and openness that he may have started with, I can't judge. But now I think he's very clearly a tool of Russian intelligence.
She had a lot of pretty harsh things to say about WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, you know, in part because she was Secretary of State when they put out 250,000 diplomatic cables. So it's not surprising that she didn't have any warm feelings for him, and you know, and he returned the favor.
Internal WikiLeaks chats left no doubt about what Assange believed to be the best political outcome in the coming presidential election. It would be much better for a Republican win, he says. Clinton is a bright, well-connected, sadistic sociopath.
The American liberal press, in falling over themselves to defend Hillary Clinton, are erecting a demon that is going to put nooses around everyone's necks as soon as she wins the election, which he is almost certainly going to do.
In March 2016, WikiLeaks released a searchable archive of more than 30,000 emails obtained through Freedom of Information. The emails were from Clinton's private email server while she was Secretary of State. Internal WikiLeaks correspondence said the purpose of creating the archives was because it's useful and will annoy Hillary, and because we want to be seen as a resource or player in the US election.
You've been taking an interest, I understand, in the whole issue of the emails she sent using her private server. Do you have any of the undisclosed emails?
Well, taking interest, I think, is putting it mildly. We've published 32,000 of them in some analysis. We have upcoming leaks in relation to Hillary Clinton, which is great. We actually have WikiLeaks has a very big year.
But some of the ones that have not yet come into the public domain, you are planning to put out.
We have emails related to Hillary Clinton, which are pending publication. That is correct.
In Moscow, the Russians had begun their own campaign to undermine Hillary Clinton. The Russian Military Intelligence Agency, the GRU, established a secret cyber operations unit. In April 2016, the hackers attacked the Democratic National Committee and stole tens of thousands of emails.
I have to hand it to the GRU, Russian Military Intelligence, which eventually was quite clearly identified as the organization that hacked into the Hillary Clinton's campaign and into the Democratic National Committee, stole all these emails. And the Russian government was named as sort of the prime suspect.
The Russians established a website called DC Leaks to begin publishing the emails, and in an attempt to cover their tracks, created an online persona called Guccifer 2.0.
Up on the web pops this sort of blog, never heard of before, from somebody calling himself Guccifer 2.0, this sort of antic voice in English saying, eventually saying, I'm a Romanian hacker. But a big message he wanted to convey from the very beginning, from that first day, was, I hacked the DNC. And they point at the Russian state, ha, ha, ha. Actually, it wasn't that hard. I'm just a lone hacker, and I did it myself. So Guccifer 2.0 seemed very eager to point the finger away from the Russian government. That was a big theme, but it was a brilliant move. As it turned out, of course, the GRU had created Guccifer 2.0, and this was sort of a fig leaf for Russian intelligence.
WikiLeaks wanted whatever Guccifer had. Correspondence revealed in the US indictment of the Russian hackers shows that on June the 22nd, WikiLeaks sent Guccifer a private message on Twitter. Send any new material here for us to review, and it will have a much higher impact than what you're doing.
WikiLeaks was there for them. It was a huge boon to distribute those emails through WikiLeaks, which had a sort of established audience in the millions around the world.
2 weeks later, WikiLeaks sent another message to Guccifer. If you have anything Hillary-related, we want it in the next 2 days, preferably, because the Democratic National Convention is approaching. Soon after, Guccifer sent WikiLeaks an encrypted file.
So the DNC emails were hacked. The DNC emails go public right before the Democratic Convention, at a time to create the maximal pain.
Was the convention taken into consideration in the timing of the release of those emails?
I'm sure it was, because journalists have taken into consideration timing of the release of the information or stories. And any journalist who will be denying the fact that they want to maximize the impact of their story is either telling a lie or, well, basically being dishonest, because every journalist wants to maximize the impact of the story, and timing comes into play.
WikiLeaks' release of the stolen emails threw the Democratic National Convention into uproar.
It's a major embarrassment for Democrats on the eve of their nominating convention.
Just when Hillary Clinton was hoping to put the whole notion of an email controversy behind her.
A WikiLeaks email dump suggests Bernie Sanders may have been right. The primary system was rigged against him.
The convention was supposed to be Hillary Clinton's springboard into the presidency. But the emails showed the DNC had favoured Clinton over Bernie Sanders all along. The revelations outraged Sanders' supporters.
And we should not allow Hillary Clinton to win this election.
People were chanting, "Lock her up," yelling, creating stage demonstrations on the floor. It was, a fair amount of maelstrom.
Neera Tanden was a policy director for the Clinton campaign and one of the top-ranking Democrats whose emails were leaked.
People could see the level of emotional intensity created by this leak, and it was accomplishing the ends that the Russians had, which is to undermine Hillary Clinton, to undermine the Democratic Party, to help Trump, to help the Republican Party.
While in Washington it was now widely accepted that the Russians had been behind the DNC hack,
doesn't change
Assange refused to be drawn on his source.
It is helpful to know that if a foreign government is involved, isn't that crucial information to civilians?
I think that is an interesting question. The difficulty that WikiLeaks has, of course, is that we can't, go around speculating on who our sources are. That would be irresponsible.
Well, no, you can't speculate. You know the answer. Well, Mr. Assange, you say you can't go around speculating. Do you not know the answer?
We don't give any material away as to who our sources are.
Instead, Assange chose to cast more shadows. He implied the source might have been a young DNC staffer called Seth Rich, who'd been murdered in a suspected late-night robbery.
There's a 27-year-old who works for the DNC who was shot in the back, murdered just 2 weeks ago for unknown reasons as he was walking down the street in Washington. So
that was just a robbery, I believe, wasn't it?
No, there's no finding. So
what are you suggesting? What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that our sources take risks, and they become concerned to see things occurring like that.
But was he one of your sources then? I mean,
we don't comment on who our sources are.
But why make the suggestion about a young guy being shot in the streets of Washington?
I mean, he was all but naming Seth Rich as his source. And I saw that as completely underhanded and really kind of cruel to Seth Rich's family. I think he was just trying to protect his own reputation by using Seth Rich to refute the idea that he'd become a sort of witting tool of the Russian state.
WikiLeaks was a perfect weapon for a presidential candidate seeking political advantage. The possibility that Assange might have even more damaging information on Clinton was tantalising, but it also presented a potential opportunity for a circus of shady political operatives hoping to be noticed by the Trump campaign. Chief amongst those shady characters was Roger Stone, a former Trump advisor and veteran Republican operative. In 2016, he was keen to jump on the WikiLeaks bandwagon to bolster Trump.
Roger Stone is sort of a legendary character in American politics who goes all the way back to Richard Nixon and has been sort of synonymous with political dirty tricks, you know, going way, way back. And so it was perhaps not surprising to learn that he was also a kind of buddy of Donald Trump and, you know, sort of surfaced in the Trump campaign as a fervent supporter of Donald Trump and, you know, ready to do whatever it took to get Trump elected.
Stone was arrested in an FBI raid earlier this year. He is currently facing charges including witness tampering and giving false statements in connection with the investigation into Russian interference. The charges relate to his attempt to work with WikiLeaks during the campaign.
There's this question of whether was Roger Stone somehow inside, and Stone said no, he had a friend who knew Julian Assange, and you know, there's been more public information from Robert Mueller's investigation and other sources, and certainly it suggests that Roger Stone, you know, wasn't working with Russian intelligence, that it was probably more like, you know, what one would predict from Roger Stone's entire career, which was he was sort of an opportunist, and he saw an opportunity to sort of promote Trump and promote himself at the same time, and became part of the process of, you know, building an audience for him, building suspense about these dumps of emails hacked by the Russians and, you know, Trump, you know, essentially designed to undermine Clinton's campaign.
According to the indictment of Stone, in July 2016, a senior Trump campaign official was directed to contact Stone to find out what else WikiLeaks had on the Clinton campaign. Stone then asked a contact to go to the Ecuadorian Embassy to get the pending WikiLeaks emails. They deal with the Clinton Foundation, allegedly.
I actually have communicated with Assange. I believe the next tranche of his documents pertain to the Clinton Foundation, but there's no telling what the October surprise may be.
He knows a lot about Hillary Clinton and
Stone soon changed his story and instead said he had a back channel to Assange.
No, I have not spoken to Mr. Assange. I have not met with Mr. Assange, and I never said I had. I said we communicated through an intermediary, somebody who is a mutual friend.
The friend and intermediary he referred to was Randy Credico. Credico is a fringe radio host who had once interviewed Julian Assange.
I'm a political satirist, impressionist, and they call me a satirist activist.
Randy Credico is now preparing to be the star witness in the trial of Roger Stone.
Randy, we just got this set of documents. I need you to take a look at them, to review them, read them, get back to me, let me know what you think about what's in there.
It's just going to take me forever. Look how much
It
stuff
won't take you forever. It's not that much, it's just a little.
It's like reading War and Peace. Look at all this.
It's emails and text messages. That's
The trial will focus on a series of communications between Stone and Credico that suggested they both had advance knowledge of what WikiLeaks was planning to publish. Credico now says he never had contact with Assange, and Roger Stone was all talk.
I don't think he had a back channel. I mean, you know, if you put a gun to my head and said, you have to guess correctly, did Stone have or not have a back channel, otherwise we're going to pull the trigger, I would, if my life is at stake, I'd say he never had a back channel. but he was just out there. The guy is a self-promoter, you know, he's in show business. Or maybe he did, but I can't imagine that. Why would there need to be a back channel when Assange could just go directly to the campaign? He didn't need to have Stone in the middle, but Stone needed to be in the middle so Stone could elevate his profile.
Messages from late 2016 between Credico and Stone showed they were in regular contact with each other about what WikiLeaks might have. Credico told Stone, Assange has kryptonite on Hillary. 4 weeks later, he said, Hillary's campaign will die this week. People are talking about this October surprise. How did you know that it was coming?
I said on October 1st, it's going to be a bad week for Hillary based on what I had seen over the previous 6 weeks, 8 weeks. That this is going to be a bad week for Hillary. And our campaign's going to be finished. But of course, that was hyperbole.
Julian, do you want to take that one?
On its 10th anniversary, WikiLeaks was busy preparing for another big data dump.
Now, upcoming publications. We hope to be publishing every week for the next 10 weeks. Now, we have on schedule, and it's a very hard schedule, all the US election-related documents to come out before November 8th.
Do we have any comment on whether the upcoming publications to do with the US elections will destroy Clinton or not?
There has been a lot of misquoting of me and WikiLeaks publications. In this particular case, the misquoting has to do with that we intend to harm Hillary Clinton, or that I intend to harm Hillary Clinton, or I don't like Hillary Clinton. All those are false.
On October 7, just a month before polling day, the Trump campaign was hit with the most consequential and potentially damaging story of the election.
I moved on her like a bitch.
A secretly recorded conversation Trump had several years earlier with the host of a TV show called Access Hollywood.
She's your girl's hot as shit.
You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the pussy. You can do anything.
It could have been a knockout blow, but less than an hour after the video was published, WikiLeaks released its next dump of the emails hacked from Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta.
WikiLeaks has posted thousands of emails hacked from Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, and they could offer a new perspective on her relationship with Wall Street.
Hillary Clinton and her campaign are dealing with a slow drip, drip, drip of revelations about the campaign's internal workings.
WikiLeaks posted more than 2,000 additional emails from Hillary Clinton's campaign chair, John Podesta. This is the hashtag Podesta file, I think, online.
WikiLeaks, which in the world in which we find ourselves, promised hidden information, promised some kind of secret that might be of influence, was a very clever, diabolical response to the Hollywood Access tape. And I have no doubt in my mind that there was some communication, if not coordination, to drop those the first time in response to the Hollywood Access tape.
That's simply not correct. And there is evidence to counter that. This was being worked in collaboration with other media, and you have to plan ahead. I mean, clearly the evidence is there that the timing and date was decided the day before, not on that with as a quick reaction.
This just came out.
The leaks dominated the campaign.
WikiLeaks, I love WikiLeaks.
Instead of dumping out all 50,000 emails at once, for the entire last month of the campaign, Assange doled them out, you know, day after day after day.
She's crooked, folks. She's crooked as a $3 bill.
So every day, you know, people who were covering that race would look at the latest WikiLeaks dump, find the juicy stuff, write about it. So I think it did prevent the Clinton campaign from ever sort of righting itself.
Our intelligence community just came out and said in the last few days that the Kremlin, meaning Putin and the Russian government, are directing the attacks, the hacking on American accounts to influence our election. And WikiLeaks is part of that, as are other sites.
As the leaks continued, WikiLeaks contacted Trump's son, Donald Jr. Hey Donald, great to see you and your dad talking about our publications. There's many great stories there the press are missing, and we're sure some of your followers will find it. 15 minutes later, Donald Trump sent out a tweet. Very little pickup by the dishonest media of incredible information provided by WikiLeaks. So dishonest. Rigged system.
They only found out about it through this whole deal with WikiLeaks. But if somebody...
Donald Trump mentioned WikiLeaks at least 130 times in the final month of the campaign.
Released by WikiLeaks.
It is hard to imagine that negative news that came out daily in the month preceding the election was not instrumental in the defeat of Hillary Clinton.
So you'd go as far as to say that WikiLeaks stole the election from Hillary Clinton?
I would say that WikiLeaks was a central reason of why Trump was elected.
The Democratic Party decided that it was the Russians who stole their victory and have still not been able to get into the reflection of the possibility that they actually just produced a candidate that the people didn't want to elect.
They say straight up that WikiLeaks was working with Russia to sow discord.
I mean, that has been answered, by Julian Assange, and I don't question that. The source was not a state entity and not Russian, period.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. I've just received a call from Secretary Clinton. She congratulated us, it's about us, on our victory. And I congratulated her and her family on a very, very hard-fought campaign. She fought very hard.
I think his action in the 2016 U.S. presidential election, where Julian Assange is essentially functioning as an arm of the Russian intelligence service, I think colors his legacy quite a bit. He essentially, whether through intention or just being used, allowed himself to be the tool of a foreign intelligence service to interfere in our political process, which I think is very different from just publishing government secrets.
If Assange thought that Trump as president would protect him, he was mistaken.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Once taking office, Trump would reverse Obama's decision not to pursue a prosecution over WikiLeaks' earlier release of classified information.
We looked at this case for a long time and ultimately couldn't see how you could charge Julian Assange with the publication of national security information and not have that same argument be used to charge journalists at the New York Times or Washington Post or other media outlets. That's not to say we thought Julian Assange was a journalist. We didn't. But the U.S. government law doesn't really make any provision or any protections that are specific to someone who is called a journalist. There's not even a definition of journalist anywhere in U.S. law or regulation. So if you could charge Julian Assange with publishing material, you could use those same arguments to charge an actual journalist. And we thought that was a dangerous precedent to set.
This question about whether he's an activist or a journalist comes up all the time. Where do you sit?
It's a ridiculous question. Journalism has gone astray. Thereby, when you practice real journalism, it's called activism, it's called politics. So it's, and it is activism today, telling the truth is a revolutionary act, they say these days. That's true. The question of whether he's a journalist is a very serious one for a very obvious reason, because those who say that he isn't a journalist are those who are in power, who want to decide what is who is a journalist, and thereby basically what is news and what is the truth.
6 weeks after Trump took office, WikiLeaks published Vault 7, a series of documents that detailed the electronic surveillance capabilities of the CIA. The Trump administration hit back.
WikiLeaks walks like a hostile intelligence service and talks like a hostile intelligence service. It's time to call out WikiLeaks for what it really is: a non-state hostile intelligence service often abetted by state actors like Russia.
Donald Trump might have said, "I love WikiLeaks," during the course of the election, but his administration has aggressively pursued this indictment. Mike Pompeo, as head of the CIA and now Secretary of State, said that WikiLeaks is a hostile non-state intelligence agency and that Julian Assange needs to be taken down. This is terrifying language for the Trump administration to be using about an Australian citizen and a publisher.
There's an irony here that Julian Assange helped get Trump elected, and yet now the president wants to, prosecute him. It comes under the category of be careful what you wish for.
The Trump administration reignited the investigation into Assange's dealings with US Army Private Chelsea Manning, the source of WikiLeaks' massive classified data leaks in 2010. The US Justice Department started tracking down former associates of Assange.
Basically, the FBI wanted to come here to Germany and question me about the relationship between Julian and Chelsea Manning. And it is about the reception, the illegal reception and publication of secret information.
The barometer began to shift in London too. Years of confinement in the embassy were taking their toll on Assange. Leaked CCTV footage showed his at times odd behaviour and his struggle to keep fit and healthy. Reports also began to emerge of his questionable hygiene standards.
What it shows, those videos, basically they show that he was being surveilled all the time, every moment, every movement, every minute of Julian's stay was recorded.
He didn't have any access to any outdoor area. There was no garden, nowhere for him to exercise, no way for him to leave to get medical treatment. And it became more and more tense after the change of government in Ecuador. He was under constant surveillance, video footage, recordings of him, which have now been released to the media. It was a very difficult time.
While he was still in the embassy, Assange was secretly charged with a single count of conspiring with Chelsea Manning to hack a classified government password.
Up to a few weeks ago, they claimed it was not about espionage, it was not about the publication work we did, it was not about any kind of a journalistic angle, but that it was about computer crime. And 1.5 years ago, already, we have proof that a totally different type of investigation was going on. And this is very important, I think, to keep in mind for what is to come.
Assange's asylum in the embassy came to an end after a change of government in Ecuador.
The new government basically decided that the protection of Julian Assange was in the way of the good new relationship that they were seeking with the United States. And they decided to end up that protection.
I was actually due to see Julian in the embassy that day and was getting ready to go down to the embassy when I got the call that he'd been arrested. Basically what happened is he was called into the ambassador's office. The ambassador gave him a letter and said his asylum was over and asked him to leave. When he refused, saying it was unlawful, the British police were invited into an embassy, which is extraordinary, and arrested him and took him out of there.
Defiant to the end, Julian Assange was physically carried out of the embassy and into a waiting police van. He was taken into custody in a London prison to serve a 50-week sentence for jumping bail. 6 weeks later, the US Justice Department announced it was seeking his extradition on 1 hacking charge and 17 espionage charges.
They are going after this with, both barrels blazing. Each count of the Espionage Act carries a potential 10-year prison sentence, and they can be consecutive. And then there's also the conspiracy to violate the unauthorized computer access statute, which is a 5-year offense. So you add that all together, that's 175 years.
We warned about that since 2010. It's why he sought asylum inside the Ecuadorian Embassy. And the moment he stepped out of the embassy, precisely what we warned about happened. He was served with a US extradition request for publishing truthful information. This is an incredibly damaging precedent for free speech.
There is a very realistic possibility that if Mr. Assange were extradited into the United States and convicted of these charges, that he could spend the rest of his life in prison. And there is no parole in the federal system in the United States. He could die in prison, and he could spend that time in a high-security, maximum security facility, largely, if not entirely, in solitary confinement.
The charges against Assange relate to the classified military files leaked by former Private Chelsea Manning. After 7 years in prison, Manning was pardoned by President Obama.
Good afternoon, everyone.
But this year was arrested again for refusing to cooperate with the prosecution of Assange.
Attempting to coerce me with a grand jury subpoena is just not going to work. I will not cooperate with this or any other grand jury. So it doesn't matter what it is or what the case is, I'm just not going to comply or cooperate. Facing jail again, potentially today, doesn't change my stance.
Chelsea Manning has now been jailed again.
It does not appear that there is any reason why they have a need for Chelsea Manning's testimony at this point. But in addition to being concerned about prosecutorial overreaching generally, it certainly concerns me because I do think it is a symptom of the disease of how far this administration is willing to go in its pursuit of Mr. Assange.
Regardless of how Assange is now viewed by many, the charges have sent a chill through the media and free speech advocates around the world.
British justice! No justice! Free Assange now!
I don't like him. I deplore some of the things he's done. I don't agree with him about some of the ways in which he handled information. But as charged, I think we have to stand with him because journalism isn't espionage. I mean, whatever Julian was up to, I don't think it was espionage.
Once you choose to charge Assange with publishing information that the government said was secret, it's not a huge step to charge the New York Times or a New York Times reporter or editor with publishing information the government said should be secret.
The Trump administration's aggressive pursuit of Assange reveals just how far the reach of America extends.
I think the Trump administration doesn't have the same concerns about journalism and the threat to journalism that the Obama administration did. They're not concerned about being seen as being tough on journalists. I mean, the president has talks about journalists as the enemy of the people. He talks about fake news, so I don't think they lose any sleep at all over threats to journalism.
Julian's not American. He's Australian. So if we are saying that somebody who's not a citizen of a country that he's writing about is bound by their official secrecy laws and can be extradited to their country to spend time in their prisons, where does that leave us?
While history will remember Julian Assange as the first significant digital information activist, even his detractors now fear that if he is ultimately convicted for espionage, Assange's activism could herald a new media environment with even less freedom, and not just in the United States.
I'm very concerned that the decision to revisit the Assange case, the decision to ask for a formal extradition, will have an impact in terms of the ability of the United States to be an advocate for journalism around the world, for freedom of speech around the world.
I hope that he will be remembered as a very courageous individual who published information fearlessly from a sincere and heartfelt, and I think what history will judge as a correct belief that the public had a right to know this information.